Welcome back, Wild Hearts, to Alchemy with Sheeana Leigh. This is the space where transformation becomes tangible and embodiment becomes your sacred way of life. And today you are joining me from the back seat of my car. I'm in my feral and free era, just getting out of the shower, wet hair, and really raw dogging it in the back of my car. So you're joining me for a wild ride. And today I really wanted to drop into the depth of what it means when you've walked through the fire already. So today's episode is all about the healing hangover, when enough is enough. We're going to get really raw and real on what comes after the healing and more into this embodiment liberation space. So basically, if you have walked through the fire, if you have done the deep work, if you've sat in the dark and you've done uncomfortable, holy work of healing, and you're wondering, am I done now? Is that it? Have we finished? Because maybe you didn't just come here to endlessly process. You came here to truly live. And this thought really bubbled inside me, and not for the first time, but it came through very strongly a little while ago. I've just been tired and exhausted and done with the never ending searching, looking for wounds, perfecting things. And I've had this notion before, and I've just been like, you know what? I'm done. I'm whole. And it was a peaceful, loving, delicious time. And then I got sucked into the loop again. And it's not just myself that has been through this, but a lot of clients lately, a lot of friends, a lot of women around me are going through this same notion of like, I am done healing. I am really over it. I'm tired of it. And I don't believe that we endlessly are meant to heal. I believe we are here to live, to truly live and taste the textures and flavors of life and to be in our full aliveness. So, we're going to explore the science of the survival brain today. So, we're going to dive into the psychological roots of modern healing work and what could have been if we had have taken a different path. So, the path of wholeness and not pathology. And it was interesting when I had this thought brewing in my body and this feeling. I came across an Instagram post. I don't know whose it was, but they were talking about the modern healing modalities and how we have gone with Freud, and how if we had have taken a different pathway, we wouldn't have gone down this constant digging and looking back. So we're going to explore that today. I've got notes with me because I really dove deep into these pathways, and I wanted to talk about Freud and Jung and shadow work and archetypes, and what it really means to embody a new self. So not just a concept, but as a lived mythic truth. So let's dive in today. First and foremost, I really want to dive into the survival brain and healing loop, that our brain is actually wired for survival and not joy. So invoking pleasure and joy, especially for those of us who have quite a traumatic past and have moved through a lot of childhood trauma and really have that embedded in our systems, how it's actually a process and we have to invite joy and pleasure into our life, or else we will constantly be seeking and looking for safety and not aliveness. So your nervous system's default setting is to scan for threats, not to relax into pleasure. And knowing this, and knowing if you have had a lot of trauma, if you have PTSD, your nervous system is a little bit fried and its default setting is to be quite in a space of freeze, shut down, fawn, or fight mode, then you really have to train it like a muscle to invite pleasure in and to relax into pleasure and joy. And this is something I'm really passionate about as a woman, because I believe that is our natural, organic state of being. But this is why healing work can become addictive because the body always finds something that feels unsafe, right? If we were to sit in a space constantly looking for safety external to us, we will be seeking forever. There will always be another wound to chase. But at some point, the real healing is to stop the digging and to start dancing in the element of joy and pleasure. I really wanted to highlight this because the deeper we have created the groove in our neurological pathway to survival and safety mechanisms that we are in our defense mechanisms, the deeper the groove we have to create in pleasure and joy and play, just to really show our body that we are actually safe in pleasure and joy. And that is something that I've really had to learn a lot as a woman, because I didn't really have that handed down to me. And we naturally inherit our mother's nervous systems. And so which is a really beautiful point to slide in here, because when we inherit our mother's nervous systems, it all depends what your mother's nervous system was wired as. And moving into like the mother line and the maternal line around this Mother's Day space, it's really important to understand that we have a responsibility to unwind and release how our nervous system is wired for our next generation. I really would love to dive into this real piece that I got really like passionate about this last couple of weeks. The Freud versus Jung road, divergence, basically. So Freud, which is largely who our entire mental health, well-being, psychology aspects is based upon today in modern society, he was the father of psychoanalysis, focused on digging into the past. He believed that our symptoms were caused by repressed childhood trauma, and the work was to uncover and fix them, right? So you can imagine why, if we're constantly going back, we're constantly living in that old story, constantly going back to our childhood trauma to uncover and unlock, it starts to become a never-ending cycle and loop. And no wonder it's fucking exhausting. It's like we can't get out of the past space and really start to cultivate and call in a new embodied experience of self. And it's really important. Don't get me wrong. I actually believe it's so important to uncover and release our childhood trauma and our pain, especially somatically in the body, in the fascia. They are held in our cells and we carry them and they're passed down. So yes, I feel like it's important to go into that space and to do the deep work and to release. I believe that there is another space who I'm really passionate about, which is Jung's work. He was a former protege, and he broke away from the mainstream. So he was kind of seen as a little bit of a rebel. And I love this because a lot of my work is based around his work and his theories. But he saw symptoms as sacred symbols, not dysfunctions. He invited us to not look back, but to integrate and to become whole, to embody our full self. He taught us to analyze, so Freud taught us to analyze the past, and Jung invited us to integrate the soul. And I love this because I always work on those two levels. Yes, go back, release, dredge it up, kind of clear out the muck, but also you are not broken and you're not this project that is never ending. You are this divine masterpiece. And integrating the soul and these fractured pieces of self allows you to become fully expressed, fully alive, and your whole self without fractures. And this is where we start moving into a completely different path. This is the path not taken. And what would happen if I really sat with that, and if you would sit with that too, if we had have taken Jung's path instead of Freud's path, how different would our mental health system be today? How different would psychology be and healing and all of this? Like, it's so interesting. What if we had have taken a different path? What if the world didn't choose to center the wounds per se, but to actually choose and center wholeness instead? What kind of path would we have really ignited within each and every of us? Imagine if healing culture was founded on his vision, on Jung's vision, where symptoms are just messages and where the sacred archetypes are doorways, where the self is not actually broken at all, but becoming over and over again. Oh, that just gives me so much chills. I'm so deliciously excited about this. And as you can tell, I'm fumbling a little bit today because this activates me a lot. And I'm in a very weird surrounding, being in the back of my car, and it's raining. And it's not my usual atmosphere. So I'm really like sitting here trying to nestle into this messiness of self at the moment as we speak. I'm having a real time experience of it. And it's hilarious. So we might have grown up in a world that really honored emotion if we had have taken this path, really welcomed darkness as a sacred portal, and really allowed the self to be reborn again and again and again, and see how heartbreak is not a proof of your brokenness, but it is as an initiation. And this is something that calls to my heart so deeply, because I believe that everything is a portal and an initiation. Heartbreak, grief, alchemizing your emotions. But it's really important to understand that if we move through these two very different pathways, one is you're constantly needing to fix and to go back and to reparent, and it is tiring. It's tiring on a already exhausted nervous system, and moving through our society and how we're so isolated and not in our community element, and not, humming and co-regulating with our family and friends like we should be, like we are organically designed to. We're so isolated. And then I can see why psychosis and all of these like spiritual merry-go-rounds and ego-driven selves are just absolutely going crazy at the moment, because there's so much identity that is linked to this healing loop, this wounded healer, this archetype of the savior. There's definitely so much energy present with them, because we're living in a world where we're isolated, alone, and moving through our own internal shit again and again and again, without really sitting with the fact that, what if we were already whole? What if we didn't have to go back and do that for our nervous systems? No wonder we're tired. What if mental health and our well-being at this moment was not so much about fixing dysfunction, but midwifing your becoming? And they are very two different flavors. And when I think about the deliciousness of midwifing not only my own becoming, but midwifing those around me and their becoming, it totally flips the script on power dynamics, on all of these things that are quite icky and sticky that we're seeing being shaken out in our culture and society at the moment. Right? We have this whole big experience of spiritual wellness communities and false lights. And then we have this pathological viewpoint of healing and mental health. And what if the system is flawed and it's actually creating more mental health issues and more problems, because we're being siphoned and looped into this space of never ending energy siphoning, which diminishes our power and our own sovereignty and our own aliveness and expression We can't outwardly express and be alive and full of life if we're constantly internal and seeking within. And I wanted to highlight a point here as well that I read recently, that men and women's pathways to spiritual enlightenment or wholeness, or whatever you want to call it. I don't really like the word ascension, but you know what I'm trying to say, consciousness, are two very different pathways. And I want to speak on this because it's really becoming very prominent in my brain space at the moment, about how women generally are internal seekers anyway. We do the deep dive. We are very internal. We self-reflect, and we actually need to build up our ego a little bit more, right? Whereas men are naturally more ego driven and more hardwired for themselves, and they need to actually be more relational. And this is interesting to me because I can definitely say without a doubt that most of my clients and the people and women I work with really do need to incorporate like their inner worthiness, and they do need to pump up their ego instead of being so internal and in the self. And so I can see how this kind of mind frame, and again, men are just naturally more ego driven and the self, and they need to learn to be more relational, especially in this time and age. And it's interesting. I can definitely see that. And I can see how having Freud's way of looking at our mental health and our well-being, and constantly doing the deep inner work and going back to the past and digging it up, can amplify what us as women are already doing. And of course, we're getting burnt out and fatigued and exhausted. Perhaps we don't have to constantly do the deep digging and searching. There is a place and a space and a time. Yes, absolutely. But then when do we get to actually feel our full aliveness and pleasure and be fully bold and embodied and let our radiance shine out into the world? It's really, really interesting. And I believe that archetypal embodiment is definitely a new way forward, even though it is an old way for sure. But it is the thread that I carry now and a lot in my work, because it's not just about shadow work, but embodied archetypal work. And this really helps us to step into the blueprints of our soul, to remember the sacred parts we were taught to exile. So the lover, the wild woman, the priestess, the inner child, the queen, the crone, the creatrix, all just to name a few of these beautiful archetypal embodiment pieces. They aren't just characters. They are actually living energies waiting to be embodied. And this is a lot of the work that I do. So instead of constantly looking at the per se broken inner child and having to resource and integrate and constantly walk with, which I do feel like we have to constantly walk with our inner child sometimes, there comes a space where you move into an archetype of a more empowering, more delicious archetype of the self, of the wild woman, like this delicious archetypal essence of your full, wild, uninhibited self, and calling that in and working with it, knowing that you don't have to keep fixing yourself, that you get to become your own myth and you get to live the version of you who has already healed. And oof, let that land for a moment. Oh my God, so good. Just sipping my coconut water because I feel like I haven't taken a breath for this. I'm very passionate about it. Oh, clearly. Imagine if we lived in that world where you get to, yeah, become your own myth. You don't have to keep fixing yourself. and you get to live the version of you who is already healed. I'll say that again because it was so beautiful. And you can make that choice. You can absolutely make that choice and go, yep, I'm getting off of this healing loop cycle now. I am healed enough. And that's a key word, because I don't believe we come into this human world and this life unscathed and unscarred. It is definitely part of the human experience. And I don't believe that we, get to this level of being perfectly healed and all of our scars attended to. Maybe in this life, maybe not, maybe in another. But to really sit in a space of, I am healed enough. I have done the work. I can be self-responsible, accountable. I've seen my shadows. I know my muck. I am healed enough to embody this new frequency and live this version of a life that I desire and I crave and I'm entitled to and I do deserve. So I believe that there comes a time when these signs start popping up in your space and in your life, that they show you that you're ready to stop healing and you're starting to live or wanting to just really move in a completely different way. And for me, it came through as I felt like I wasn't broken anymore. You just feel ready. It's like a couple of years ago, I had this come through really interestingly. And this is why I can see how in Christianity and stuff, people return to this state of like wholeness and being healed, because they do feel held and healed by this omnipresent creative force. And they come from this space of not brokenness. It's very interesting. But I feel like when the time is right, you will just feel ready. You start to really crave play and pleasure and joy and not pain, and crave it in your life as an experience of your daily life. You no longer really start to prove or need to prove that you're worthy or you're deserving to people. You start to really sink into that element of like, I don't really care what these people think about me. You let go of this good girl archetype and then don't care if you come across as a villain or whatever people may think about you. You kind of sit in your own lane, really feel this like embodied worthiness and safety and deservingness, and you just know. You trust that the joy in your body and the pleasure in your body, instead of doubting it, instead of waiting for the shoe to drop, grasping at it so tightly and being afraid to let it go, because as soon as you let it go, it doesn't last forever. And that is another sign that you've kind of released that trauma looping and that survival looping. A lot of belief systems come up around that, of this won't last forever, waiting for the other shoe to drop, looking for the negatives, trying to fix everything all the time, trying to control things, holding on too tightly. These are all signs that you're actually doubting pleasure and joy and aliveness in your life. And if you start to just feel the deep desire of embodiment over this excavation process, because yeah, you are not a permanent project. You are a living, breathing work of art. I will say that again and again because it's really landed on my cells, in my bones the last like month or two. I'm just like, I'm done. I'm ready. And I just wanted to grab my notes before I kind of wrap up this session, this kind of erratic session. I will go deeper into this, I feel, when I'm feeling a little bit more comfortable in my space and doing this podcast in my car. But let me grab my phone and let me tell you about going into the Freud and Jung experience again. Let me read it out to you guys, because honestly, it's absolutely fabulous. So they were, at the time, they were the two big giants in regards to psychology, mental health, and well-being. So Sigmund Freud was the father of psychoanalysis. He focused on unconscious drives, repressed trauma, sexual desires, and childhood wounds, which I'm a big yes to. Yes, yes, yes. Carl Jung, he was Freud's protege. He split off dramatically. He believed in the collective unconscious archetypes and that healing was about integration of the self. He focused more on meaning, myth, dreams, and the soul. How yummy is that? And individuation, becoming whole by embodying all parts. He believed symptoms weren't just problems to fix, but signals pointing towards deeper purpose. So Freud was really the pathology and past focus, and Jung was integration and embodiment. There were other powerful people at that time that were in and moving around the mix. So Alfred Adler introduced the idea of the inferiority complex. And oof, if you've ever started a business, put your face out there online or done anything like that, you will know this one well. But he believed we're all striving towards personal growth and belonging. So less digging and more direction. Again, a little bit of a different texture and flavor to the modern day psychology route that we have been traversing. Wilhelm Reich, he was a controversial student of Freud, and he believed that trauma is stored in the body. So this is definitely an aspect that we are delving into quite prominently over the last couple of years. He developed the orgone energy theory. So very body-based, very sexual energy aligned. He is very much in regards to like moving through the body ailments. And that is definitely somatic therapy based. So, how does that all land, my loves? How does that feel? Imagine the world we would live in if we had have taken a different path. So, I wrote a little note here too. What if instead of becoming a world obsessed with wounds, we became a world devoted to wholeness? Imagine if the history of healing followed Carl Jung's compass and not Freud's fixation on pathology, but Jung's deep bow to the self. Not the endless digging into dysfunction, but a reverence for the soul's myth, the body's myth, the archetypal dance of becoming. Freud taught us to look back, to crawl into the dark corridors of our childhoods, to unearth the roots of our suffering like a forensic trauma detective. And yes, there is wisdom in that, as I spoke about previously, but it also keeps us circling in the same ache, naming ourselves by what broke us, heavily identifying ourselves with the wound instead of what birthed us. But Jung offered a portal, a path towards integration, towards the embodiment of the full self. He saw the shadow, yes, but not as a curse. And this is a difference. He saw it as a call. He believed symptoms were not enemies, but messengers, that dreams were not random, but were sacred, and that our deepest wounds might be the wombs through which purpose is born. What if we had followed that? What if mental health wasn't about managing dysfunction, but midwifing our wholeness? Again, what if healing wasn't about fixing what's wrong, but remembering what is true, and truth being a way of life? This isn't to say we bypass this pain at all, but that we stop making it our home. There will always be more wounds to chase, another trauma to track, but at some point, the real healing is to stop digging, start living, and being. To name ourselves not by the scars we carry, but by the light we radiate. This is the return, not to the past, but to presence, to pleasure, to play, to the truth that we did not come here just to survive the story or our story, and identify ourselves with that story again and again till we can't move. It becomes a trapped prison and a cage. We came here to truly embody our becoming, our aliveness, our love, our pleasure, our joy, our radiance. And this is what I would love for us to sink into and sit with again and again and again. Maybe it's time to get off the circle. this carousel of round and round and round, and move into a place of integration and wholeness. Because this is your permission slip, basically. Let me, in my back of my car, wet hair, wild as hell, feral and free, be a reminder to you that we don't have to have this heavy fixation on the past and keep digging there. We can choose to move into that space of integration and move into the path that has not been walked, right? Like, this is the call. This is the call for that. We don't have to endlessly process. We don't have to do that anymore. And we are actually able to be endlessly pleasured instead. So, if you've been stuck in that loop, chasing the next shadow, excavating the next ache, this is your reminder. This is the podcast to remind you that you're not broken, that you are just becoming. You're not a permanent project. Healing is not your identity. Being wounded is not your identity. And this is your initiation call. Basically, you get to decide when the story shifts. And if that is now, that is now. You get to wake up one day, as I did, and go, okay, I'm done healing. I'm ready to actually truly live. And that's all I really want to say very passionately today. You get to decide. Let me know if this episode cracked open something for you and gave you permission to claim your joy and your play and your pleasure. Share it with somebody. Share it with the women in your life that are ready to get off of this loop and this cycle, and say enough is enough. We've done the deep healing, the deep digging and wound work, and moved round and round and round. Like, enough is enough. We're ready to expand and express and be our full selves in this delicious space of playful energy and essence. I really believe that this is moving through our collective, especially as women, strongly at the moment. I've been posting a lot of things about it, and a lot of people are getting the same messages and the same signs. And I hope that this really spoke to your soul and to your wild heart. And yeah, if you would love to leave a comment, reach out to me via my DMs. Please do so on social media, on IG. I will post this to YouTube, even though it's going to be so raw and so unhinged for me. I'm going to post it because I think this is my new normal now, so I have to get used to it. Again, if you would love to support my work, I'm going to share a link at the end of this, and it's called Buy Me a Coffee. So if you would like to show your appreciation and allow me to do my work and offer a donation so I can purchase a coffee and have a coffee, you can. I'll put the link below. And I also wanted to, as a freebie, as a bonus, I have created a free ebook with an audio guide at the end called The Pleasure Codes, which is basically moving through the blocks to pleasure, joy, and aliveness, how to unlock them, and moving through these like very, very beautiful codes of wisdom of how to embody more pleasure and aliveness and joy in your life. And that is my gift to you to start this journey, this healing journey, and this embodiment journey of pleasure and love and life and eroticism. So you will find that link below there as well. But until next time, I hope that you keep alchemizing, keep embodying, and keep expressing your aliveness. And yeah, keep choosing the version of you who is already whole. And that is something that we have to remember again and again and again. And yeah, I hope that really sits in your heart today. And sending you lots of love, and I'll see you next time on Alchemy. Mwah. Bye.